Hi everybody, welcome to yet another video. This one's a candy paint job on a bike tank, and it's with the ANI F160. That's later on in the video for some clear coat, and the ANI R150, which is a mini gun. The F160 is a full size, the R160 is a mini gun version for the various base coat stages of the candy. Just before I start, just to say thanks to everybody. We've had a few new subscribers on board, which is always good to see. If you're liking what you're seeing and you're hearing, if you could think about giving us a subscription, it just helps get us publicized more on YouTube, etc., because YouTube seem to have these algorithms that go on that, you know, obviously the more people watch the videos and the more they subscribe, the higher up they go. So anyway, if you would be kind enough to do that, it'd be much appreciated. Thanks very much. So we're also on Instagram. I'll get all this out of the way at the start. We're also on Instagram and we're on Facebook as well. I'll put a link in the description to everything so you can find out there if you feel that way inclined. So what we're doing, as I say, we've got a bike tank to do, and we're going to do it in a purple candy colour. So we're starting off with a bike tank that's quite a dark colour, so we're going to initially go through with some white base coat. So you could use a wet on wet primer, or primer sealer as you say in the US, to effectively seal it up, but the clear coat hasn't been broken, so it's a good solid base. It's just the wrong colour. I'm going to put a fine silver over it, and this is actually a Mercedes silver, which is a 744, which is a really light silver, so it gives the base of the candy quite a bright colour, if that makes sense. Just makes it less dark, because the obviously the colour that's underneath the candy will change the ultimate colour of the candy. We've got nothing to go by, so we can please ourselves what we're doing with this. So we'll start off with a white base, which is what we're applying with, and it's a good way of seeing when you look at the little R160, which is what we're using here. It's actually a very, very good gun. You see here, because you're putting white over a dark colour, you get an initial impression of the coverage of the gun, i.e. how fine it can spray. And as you can see, it's actually very, very good. Now this gun retails in the UK, I haven't actually looked for a while, but I think they've gone up a bit. I think they're now about 110 GB pounds. I got it from Spray Guns Direct. They seem to have ANI sewn up for, certainly as far as the UK goes, and also the rest of Europe, I think. You've got the Italian shop, which is PRP shop. They also do ANI. So depending where you're based, it might be better to get the stuff from either of those. But I don't really know any other sort of big outlets for them, really. If anybody does, then give us a shout and let me know, because it might be worth comparing them. But that's the only two really I know of. But I got these from Spray Guns Direct. They seem to offer quite good service. I do pay for them. I'm not sponsored or anything. So the idea of using these two guns separately, or on the same project, but obviously well, you couldn't use them together, could you really? But you know what I mean. Using these two guns, showcasing these two guns, is what I'm trying to say. Is that for the price they are, this one, as I say, is about £110. The full size gun, which I'll be using later, the F160, is also about 110 GB pounds. So for about £220, you can get yourself quite a capable pair of guns. So you've got a mini gun for the smaller stuff, wheels and things like that, where you don't really want a full-size gun, mainly because of physical size rather than anything else, but you don't really want a full-size gun, and you've got a full-size gun for when you need it. So for that sort of money, you can get a reasonable pair of guns that work very, very well. Now, one thing that this gun does like its pressure. Now for base coat, the base coat you see here, this is the final result of the white. For base coat, I tend to use it at around about 2.5 to 3 bar, which is, quick calculating head on, that's going to be about 30. It's going to be about 35 to 40 psi for you guys in the US and those on the Imperial system. So it's a bit more pressure than most other guns. Certainly, some of the guns people use will be like 1 bar, 1.1 bar. The average is normally 2. 2 bar is a good place to set a gun when you want to try and find out. But I find these little guns do seem to like a little bit of pressure, which is actually quite funny because ANI. I've done a couple of reviews on the ANI Skull, which I bought. And one of the things that come up with that was people saying, oh, you're using it on too low pressure. And I didn't find that it needed the sort of pressure that ANI recommend. I just didn't find it needed it at all. But with this smaller gun, when you look at the various leaflets that ANI have on this smaller gun, the R160, they actually recommend a lower pressure than I find works better. So it just goes to show that I've said in the past, and I'll still say, look at the manufacturer's figures, try that to start with, and see where you want it to be with the materials you use, obviously doing what you're doing. So don't take it as gospel that what the manufacturer says is correct, but certainly in the case of this, it isn't, in my opinion. It needs much more pressure, so I tend to use it. We only use it for base coat and candy on here, but if I use it for base coat and candy, as I said, it's about 2.5 to 3 bar, and if I use it for clear coat, about 3.5 bar is where you really want to be. I know some people use them at 4 bar, but I don't feel the need to use it at that. It gives really, really good results at about 3.5 bar. But one of the things you'll find with a candy paint job, and if you're looking at this because you wanted to do a candy paint job, is you'll need something that gives an even coverage, because you will notice any overloaded patches. So whether that's overloaded with a candy or silver or whatever colour you've got underneath. This silver's not too bad because it's very, very bright, so you tend not to get, too much mottling with it anyway. But some silvers, if the gun's not particularly good or your distances are not particularly right, you can get some dark patches. So for example, if you're spraying with a silver and you get too close with one of your passes, you'll find that the outer edges, top and bottom of the fan, actually gets slightly darker because the flake sits slightly higher and it catches the light differently. You also get like a spread of material on the outside edge sometimes, and it just gives you like they'd say tiger stripes, not quite tiger stripes, but it just gives you a sort of a motley base. As I say, this silver's not so prone to it, but some of the darker silvers you can get it more. So you want a spray gun that will give you the best chance of getting a nice even pattern. If you know what you're doing, if you do this sort of thing frequently, you will be okay because you know what to look out for. But if you're watching this video and you're relatively new, these guns are actually ideal because they're not particularly expensive. I know they're not super cheap. Somebody said to me the other day, you never use cheap guns. Well, I do use cheap guns, but I do like my tools and I like a quality tool. So I tend to buy the better quality stuff, which is how I've been in most of my life, if that makes sense, as far as buying better quality tools. Not in everything, but better quality tools. So try and buy the best you can get at the time. Obviously, it's pointless, not giving the kids any food to get a decent spray gun. Your priorities need to be right. But certainly, I don't think these are particularly expensive. Certainly compared to modern day, some of the guns are really, really expensive. So I still think these give excellent value for money. Pretty good build quality. Again, a few people have said to me, in fact you'll see on some of the individual tests of the ANI, the R160, people have said, the front sealing ring, there's a small sealing ring at the rear of the tip, and people have said to me, oh, they're always going wrong, always breaking, etc. I haven't found that at all. You do need to replace them, and they're quite easy to replace, and they're very cheap. They're about £4 or £5 GB pounds for 10, and they will last you ages. So I can't quite see the problem. It's a very cheap, easy thing to change. So I don't think it's a game changer really, that they need to be changed reasonably often, because it's something, as I say, that's so easy to do. And you know, SATA have a similar system, probably a bit more reliable as far as needing changing, but they have a similar system, and so do DeVilbiss on some of their guns. FLG5 springs to mind. That little seal at the back of that is always going. But again, they're relatively cheap, and you know, seal up well once they're changed, and they're quick to change as well. It's not a big deal. So we come to the candy side now, and with the candy side, this is very representative of how this gun mists nicely, if that makes sense. You will need to keep, as I say, you will need to keep that pressure up to about, with this coat, I did it at about 3 bars, so it's about the maximum I would normally go with a base coat. Because if you put it too high, it starts to go on a bit dry. Depends on the temperature, but it starts to go on a bit dry. So I went it up to about 3 bar for this particular stage, and you'll see with the first coat of candy how even it has actually coated. Yes, some of it's down to the person obviously moving the gun, but you'll see it's a very, very even spread of candy. So it's a perfectly capable gun of doing more complex colours, if that makes sense. And as I say, because of its price, you could in fact have like 2 of these, one for clear, one for base, and the same with the F160. You could have one for clear, one for base. Incidentally, the F160 makes a very, very good primer gun. When you can get it in 1.7 or 1.9. I prefer it in 1.9 for the high build primers, because it really does power it on, which is I prefer with the high build primers, and so will most people. You want to get it on so that you can sand it down afterwards. You want to get plenty of material on. So, as I was saying, with these little guns, you do get a really, really good pattern. You'll see me adjusting the fan to a little spot, and one of the things with these guns, the spot action isn't particularly fine. You'll see it in a second when it comes out on the paper to show you. It's not a bad spot, but it's not as fine as some. The adjustment's not as fine as some. But the idea, the idea of me doing a little spot is I wanted this to look nice and even. Where the filler cap is, obviously the top of the tank is where the fuel goes in, and you have a filler cap on it, and I wanted it to look as nice and even as possible. So the little ridge down the side always stays a bit more silvery. So all I'm doing here is literally trying to blend that into the rest of the tank. And with candies, you come to a stage where you're unless you're trying to follow something, you know, to be the same as an existing colour, you come to a stage where you're thinking to yourself, right, well, is that the colour I want? Because the more you add, normally the more of whatever it is. In this case, it's purple, so the more purple it gets. So you have to judge for yourself when you think the colour is what you want, and that's quite personal, or the customer or whoever is paying for it actually wants. So you have a brief, and you just literally add layers until you think it's about right. Some people have said to me, "Oh, you do candy wrong." I mean, this was a little while ago, really, but you do candy wrong. You don't do it's normally 75 to 80% overlap, and I found that you don't always have to do that. It's literally like colouring in, if that makes sense. You're after, as I say, you're after an even coverage of the work. So as long as you get an even coverage, how you get there, it really doesn't matter. It's up to you to make sure the coverage is even. And as I say, this little gun really does help you. So we're coming up to the, I'm losing my voice a bit, it's been quite a busy day, but we're coming up to the final coat of candy, and I think we're basically where we need to be. And then you'll see we go over to the F160. So with the F160, once again, you have the same small sealing ring. It's not the same ring actually, but you have the same small sealing ring at the front of the gun, and that can go sometimes. And as far as I know, that is only available in a service kit. Now the service kit isn't particularly expensive. It's around about, it's about 9 or 10 GB pounds for the service kit. But if they do go, if as you use it, they are going quite often. And by that, it like the amount you tighten the tip, if you over tighten the tip, it can crush them a bit more and make their life less than they would normally be. So if you do go through that stage, it can be quite expensive because you need to order a service kit each time. I don't think I've had to change one on the F160. It's mainly the little R. Yeah, I haven't had to change one. I've got a service kit. I've never actually used it yet, if I remember rightly. I might have changed one. I can't remember really. I've got 3 of these guns in different sizes. I can't remember whether I've needed to change it or not, but it's not a big deal. It's not something you have to change frequently, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. So, as I say, with the F160, which is coming up in a second, it represents superb value for money. It's a full-size gun. It uses more air than the FLG5. It's often compared to the FLG5, and I have done a video of it versus the FLG5 v the ANI F160. So I'll put a link in the description so that you can see that. But you'll see that value for money wise, it's a really cracking full-size gun. The air is about 10% more air than the FLG5, but I think it represents, it's actually cheaper. The FLG5's gone up by more than the ANI has. I know everything's gone up, but it's not gone up by as much, the ANI. So it represents really good value for money. I think it's a better gun, definitely a better gun for base coat and for clear coat. So yeah, I would have no hesitation recommending it. And this is coming from a guy that had an FLG5, or I think it's called the SBK 600. If you're wondering what I'm talking about in the Americas, it's called an SBK 600, I think, over there. But the FLG5, I had one for 5 years and was very happy with it. I thought it was a cracking gun. Excellent in all respects. Bear in mind the price you paid for it. Excellent in all respects. At the time, it came from 1.4, a 1.8. You could get a 2, and I think you can get a 2.5 tip for it. So it's quite versatile. They brought out a 1.3 tip for the FLG5, which made it even more versatile. And then I got an F160 just to try it, really, just to see what it was like. And I was completely converted to the F160. It's got a bigger fan, like for like, puts out a little bit more material, it atomizes finer. It's just, in all respects, it's better, in my opinion, than the FLG5. The only thing that it might not be better than, and that's in build quality. And I don't want you to think that because I'm saying it's not a good build quality, it's not built very well. It's actually built okay, but the finish is not quite there, if that makes sense. And by that, I don't mean the finish that it produces, I mean the finish of the gun. Particularly the thread around where the cap goes on, and that is a little, it just looks slightly unfinished, if that makes sense. No problem with it. It works absolutely fine. Don't be put off by what I'm saying about it, because I feel that I should point it out. the FLG5 probably is a bit more robust, would be the word. Is a bit more robust, but other than that, this knocks it out the park time after time. So we're doing the second coat of clear now, and just finishing off the candy tank really, and you can see it actually comes out superbly. And as I say, we're talking about 220 GB pounds now. And this could vary because you might get a different price. It depends on the exchange rate as well. But it's somewhere in the region of about 280, 290 US dollars. Definitely brilliant value for money. So if you're looking for a set, a mini gun and a full-size gun, you really won't go wrong with these two. They are absolutely superb guns. And here's the finished article. It looks lovely. Unfortunately, there was no sunlight. I have got a video of this in the sunlight because I did a flow coat of one the same with a Segola minigun, and it's basically the same colour as this, but I didn't think it's right to put it on the end of this video because it's obviously not the same gun, so you know it'd be showing you something that wasn't relevant really. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry I've been rambling on so much. I was going to think about putting a bit of music on and a little bit of coverage, but I've managed to find enough to ramble on anyway. Cheers guys, thanks a lot, bye bye.